The human prisoner was dragged onto the auction block, his wrists bound by glowing restraints. The crowd of alien slavers, mercenaries, and warlords observed with varying levels of interest. To them, he was just another weak species, barely worth the price of a meal. A sixel auctioneer struck a metallic staff against the ground. Lot 47, a human male. Suitable for labor, entertainment, or experimentation. Bidding starts at 200 credits. A few chuckles rippled through the audience. A reptilian warlord scoffed. 200? It doesn't even look strong enough to carry supplies. Humans are more resilient than they appear, the auctioneer countered. This one lasted 2 days without food or water in the containment cells. Quite remarkable. The warlord squinted, unimpressed, but another bidder stepped forward, a towering, battle-scarred brute with cybernetic implants. Fraxel the Bone Crusher, a name spoken in hushed whispers throughout the slave markets. He studied the human for a long moment before grunting, 50 credits. Final offer. The auctioneer hesitated. 50 was a lowball, even for a human, but Fraxel was not someone to argue with. Sold. The guard shoved the human forward, placing him under the warlord's command. His fate, it seemed, was sealed. John sat in his cell, his face unreadable. The other prisoners watched him with curiosity, whispering among themselves. Most newcomers cried, begged, or at least attempted escape. This one did nothing. A scarred veteran leaned in. "You're too quiet," he muttered. "That's dangerous in a place like this." John remained silent. The veteran sighed. "You understand me, don't you?" Still, no response. The veteran studied him for a moment before shaking his head. "You ain't broken. You're waiting." A loud clang echoed through the chamber as a guard stomped toward John's cell. A stocky, pig-like alien with a foul temper and a love for tormenting prisoners smirked as he leaned against the bars. "Not so special now, are you, human?" The guard tapped a control panel, sending a jolt of electricity through John's restraints. His muscles tensed, but he didn't cry out. That only annoyed the guard further. Not even a scream? Figures. You soft-skins break so easily. I saw your records, no real skills, no real history. Just another body to toss into the mines. John lifted his gaze just slightly, only for a second. But it was enough to make the guard step back. "Yeah, you better keep that head down," the alien grumbled, stomping away. The veteran prisoner watched him go, then turned back to John. "I've seen killers before. You got the eyes, but you ain't acting like one. That means one of two things: either you're already dead inside, or you're waiting for something real bad." John closed his eyes. The waiting was almost over. Fraxel's second-in-command idly scrolled through a confiscated data tablet, reviewing recent acquisitions. He barely glanced at the human's file before preparing to delete it, until a single word caught his eye. His breath hitched. He scanned the details again. His hands trembled. Moments later, he burst into his warlord's chambers. "My lord," he gasped, struggling to contain his fear. "The human, Lot 47, we need to execute him immediately." Fraxel raised an eyebrow. "You interrupted my meal for this?" "You don't understand," the officer stammered, thrusting the tablet forward. "His call sign. It's Reaper." Silence fell over the room. The air itself seemed to grow heavy. Fraxel stared at the word on the screen. It wasn't possible. Legends spoke of a human warrior, a ghost on the battlefield, a nightmare that entire armies feared to whisper about. Reaper. Fraxel clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe. "Are you certain?" The officer swallowed hard. "The records match." He was part of the Terran Black Operations Division. Wiped out an entire battalion of the Valoran Horde. He should be dead. The warlord's massive frame cast a long shadow over his trembling officer. "Get me everything you can on him. And tell no one. If the crew finds out, panic will spread like wildfire." The officer hesitated. And the human? Fraxel stared at the security monitor. There, in the cell, sat John, still, silent, unshaken. Double the guards, he muttered. We'll decide what to do with him later. But deep down, he knew there might not be a later. Fraxel had seen fear before. He had caused it, fed off it, used it to dominate the weak. But this was different. This fear settled in the bones and refused to leave. The name Reaper wasn't just a call sign. It was a warning. Some officers argued that they should kill him immediately. Others warned against it. What if the rumors were true? What if he had contingency plans? Humans were infamous for their unpredictability. Enough, Fraxel growled. We don't act out of fear. If he's dangerous, we'll confirm it. If he's just a man, we'll break him like any other. The others hesitated, but his word was final. Fraxel's gaze returned to the monitor. Human or legend, he would see for himself what kind of man they had captured. The slaver guards gathered around the fighting pit, eager to see what the human could do. Fraxel stood on the viewing platform, arms crossed. Put him in, he ordered. John was dragged forward, his restraints removed. He flexed his wrists but made no move to resist. His opponent, a towering, four-armed behemoth with thick, armored skin, roared and slammed its fists together. The crowd cheered, placing bets on how long the human would last. A guard shoved John forward. If you survive, maybe you'll be worth something after all. John exhaled slowly, stepping into the pit. The waiting was over. Jan glanced up at Fraxel before turning his attention back to his opponent. The slaver commander leaned forward, watching intently as the fight began. The alien charged, its massive fist swinging in a blur. John didn't react until the last second, ducking smoothly beneath the strike. In an instant, his foot snapped out, striking the creature's knee with surgical precision. A sickening crack echoed through the arena. The alien staggered, and the crowd's cheers faltered. John didn't hesitate. He twisted, moving behind the behemoth, wrapping an arm around its throat, and driving his elbow into the base of its skull. The creature collapsed like a stone. Silence filled the arena. The guards stared in disbelief. John lifted his gaze to Fraxel once more, his face unreadable. You should have killed me, he murmured. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward his cell, waiting to be taken away. Later, in the guard quarters, hushed voices filled the air. Did you see that? He dropped Gorik in 3 moves. It was a fluke. Gorik was slow. Slow? He's crushed warriors twice his size. That human, he didn't even look like he was trying. A senior guard slammed his fist against the table. Enough. He's still in a cage, isn't he? The warlord likes entertainment, and that thing in our cells is the best champion we've ever had. A nervous murmur spread through the group. One guard, lean and sharp-eyed, shook his head. You don't get it. You all heard the name. Reaper. We don't own him. We're already dead. We just haven't realized it yet. The room fell into uneasy silence. In his cell, John sat on the floor, sharpening a piece of scrap metal. He had been waiting. Now, it was almost time. The explosion rocked the compound, sending debris flying as alarms blared. Guards scrambled for weapons as chaos erupted. Prisoners swarmed through the corridors, breaking free, overwhelming their captors. In the confusion, no one noticed the human vanishing into the shadows. John moved swiftly and methodically. The sharpened scrap metal in his hand became a makeshift blade, slicing through the throat of the first guard he encountered. He took the fallen alien's plasma rifle and disappeared down the corridor. Security systems activated, turrets whirred to life, and paralytic gas hissed from vents, but none of it slowed him. John had spent his life studying enemy infrastructure, memorizing weaknesses. Within minutes, half the ship's defenses were offline. The slavers didn't know it yet, but they were already losing. Panic spread like wildfire. guards rushed through the ship, shouting frantically into their communicators. "Prisoners loose on Deck 5. We've lost control of the security doors. The human, he's gone." No one wanted to say it aloud, but they all knew the truth. John wasn't running. He was hunting. One by one, he took them down. A sentry left alone near the barracks, throat slit. A squad moving cautiously down a hallway, ambushed and silenced before they could call for help. Fear consumed them. Braxel received the reports in his command chamber, his expression darkening. "Seal the armory," he barked. "Deploy the war beasts." His officers hesitated. "Sir, we can't lock down the ship. He's already taken the control room." Braxel's claws dug into the armrest of his throne. He had underestimated the human. They all had. For the first time in years, he felt something he had nearly forgotten. Fear. A harsh crackle echoed through the ship's intercom, followed by a voice, calm, cold, final. "Your ship is no longer yours. Run while you can." The message repeated, sending chills through the remaining slavers. Some ran, scrambling for escape pods. Others, too afraid to flee, took defensive positions, gripping their weapons with trembling hands. John watched them through the security feeds. He counted their numbers, noted their weaknesses. This was no longer an escape. This was extermination. Braxel stood in the main hall, gripping a massive plasma axe. The once grand chamber was now a graveyard, bodies of his guards and officers scattered across the floor. The security monitors displayed the last remnants of his crew, cowering in corridors, too terrified to move. The escape pods had been sabotaged. The armories were emptied. The slaves were free, and the ship was no longer his. Then the doors opened. John stepped inside, his stolen weapon slung over his shoulder. He moved without hesitation, his gaze locked onto Braxel. The warlord bared his teeth. "You think you can kill me, human?" John said nothing. Braxel lunged, swinging the plasma axe in a deadly arc. The air sizzled with energy, the sheer force enough to cleave solid steel. John dodged, the blade missing by inches. Before Braxel could recover, 3 quick, precise shots rang out, knee, shoulder, hip. The warlord roared in agony, his movements sluggish. John closed the distance, grabbed Braxel's wrist, and twisted. The axe clattered to the floor. Seizing the moment, John drove his knife into the warlord's gut. Braxel gasped, eyes wide in shock. John leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Slavery ends today." He twisted the blade. Braxel fell. The battle raged throughout the ship, but the outcome was already decided. The slaves, once broken, now burning with fury, fought without mercy. Cells were torn open, captives armed. The hunters had become the hunted. Some slavers begged for their lives. They received none. Others offered wealth, ships, freedom. Their pleas were met with cold stares. John led the charge through the last strongholds. His presence alone struck fear into the slavers' hearts. The battle ended within an hour. Not a single slaver remained standing. On the bridge, silence reigned. The freed prisoners gathered, looking to the human who had delivered them. John stood at the controls, scanning the ship's systems. Weapons, supplies, a fully operational vessel. They could go anywhere. An alien woman stepped forward. "What now?" John exhaled, staring into the vastness of space beyond the viewport. Then he turned to them, his voice steady. "We go home." Word spread quickly across the galaxy. A single human had taken down Braxel the Bone Crusher, not just escaped, but utterly destroyed him and his entire operation. The name Reaper became more than a legend. It became a warning. On crime-ridden stations, in the dark alleys where slavers whispered their dealings, the story spread. He hadn't just stolen their ship, he had wiped out the entire crew in a single night. One man. One human. At first, many dismissed it as myth. Those who scoffed, those who laughed it off, soon learned the truth, the hard way. Slavers started disappearing. The ones who had been off-world when Braxel fell sent out a desperate message. Do not take humans. Some ignored the warning. Others mocked it. Then entire ships began vanishing. Transports carrying human captives never reached their destinations. The ones sent to investigate never returned. A slaver lord on the Outer Rim dismissed the rumors, claiming humans were still weak, still easy to break. Days later, his fortress burned, his men strung up along the walls as a grim reminder. No one could prove it was Reaper. But no one dared to find out. JN had held the ship for days now, yet he never claimed it. Standing alone on the bridge, he gazed out at the stars. His former captors, dead. The prisoners, free. A ship like this could make him a warlord, a king even. But he had no interest in thrones. His mission was done. Without a word, he set the ship's course and walked away from the command console. Somewhere out there, another slaver was thinking about taking a human. JN would be there to remind them why that was a mistake.